So allow me to set the context of this meeting. The problem we seek to address this evening, although focused on the immediate situation that Molly Comstock, who founded Colfax Farm over 10 years ago, is suddenly faced with losing her lease, but her situation is embedded in a much larger problem: the effects of climate change and the need to support our CSAs. The recent news about the record-setting temperatures on the west and east coasts is yet the most recent example of the regional weather disruptions, which are sure to affect global and national food distribution networks. The practice of trucking fruit and vegetables across our vast country is an unsustainable model. The carbon footprint of each peach or avocado we eat has got to be reduced substantially. It won't be long before we'll have to depend on our own agricultural infrastructure to supply us with food. And that is where our local agricultural organizations are there to help. The Colfax farm situation was brought to our attention by John Fulop, who is both a board member of the Berkshire County Land Trust and CSA member at Colfax Farm. The Land Trust and its sister organization, the Community Land Trust, in the Southern Berkshires are nonprofit organizations that date back to 1980. Together, we hold and administer leases on 3 parcels of land totaling 49 acres, restricted to year-round resident owners in South Egremont and Great Barrington, including 2 nonprofit organizations. There are 24 leaseholders in total. John Fulop encouraged us to get involved in finding a solution because we are set up to be able to accept tax-exempt donations of both land and money. I will copy that address in the chat a little bit later. The agenda for this evening is as follows. Molly will tell her personal story, the story of Colfax Farm, and she will describe her needs for new land and accommodations. Elizabeth Keene will talk to us about the Indian Line Farm and how the community working through the Berkshire Community Land Trust and the Nature Conservancy purchased the land at Indian Line when it came up for sale. How it was purchased, the house and the barn, and entered into a 99-year lease on the land. How not having to purchase the land kept the price affordable. And then about the experience of farming at Indian Line Farm as a leaseholder on the land. Margaret Moulton will tell the story of Berkshire Grown and review the suggestions that she has collated to date. Glenn Bergman will then tell the story of Berkshire Agricultural Venture and review the suggestions that have been offered to date. We will then open the floor to suggestions from Zoom participants, and participants should write their suggestions in the chat feature so that we can accurately record them. It's very helpful to put things in the chat so that if my note-taking is insufficient, we'll be able to do it. So without further ado, let's turn this over to Molly.
Hi, everyone. It's really nice to see all your friendly, welcoming faces. Hearing such overwhelming support made me want to cry. And I'm extremely overtired and really stressed, so it will be very easy for me to do that. I did put a little something together here so that I could stay focused for you. The biggest and the most important thing for me to say is how overwhelmed I feel with gratitude for all of you who are present here and the larger community for immediately being so loving and supportive and kind while this news has been revealed, and it just is really helping me move forward and as this next chapter unfolds. Before I get into the story of Colfax Farm, I just want to clear up that even though my lease is ending on West Road in Alford, Ray Wilcox has been the most generous landlord. He's allowed me to do so many things to help grow my business. And even though the lease is ending due to some personal and complicated reasons, I'd kind of like, for my own self-respect and respect to the others involved, to just kind of leave it at that and understand that this is a event that's happening to me in my personal life, but like you were mentioning earlier, that it's revealing the land insecurity that so many beginning farmers, young farmers, small farmers deal with, and that hopefully this event can just be a larger example for, or an example for a larger problem that is happening to us in our local community and across the country, of just housing insecurity and land insecurity. I've been farming for 10 years. I've moved to several different places in this journey of land insecurity, but always been offered land by, very generous people. And the way that my farm has succeeded and grown is because of essentially free land leases and free housing. I was in West Stockbridge on the Baldwin family farm's land, and then I moved to the Wilcox farm. Prior to that, I was in East Chatham. I've had my CSA for 7 years. And I think the best way for me to talk about how I feel about farming is how important connection is to me. It's like one of my deepest core values is to build connection, create connection. And like this moment right now is a really beautiful example of that. And farming, and especially farming through a CSA model, is what helps me create that and fulfill that and make more of that. So I think when I think about my passion for farming, I think about, being connected to the land and being connected to my community. So I'm hoping that whatever happens next for Colfax Farm is a place where more of that can continue. And I don't know. I just am really supremely grateful that you are all out there and think that this is important. And it's it's really intense, but I'm really grateful. I'm not sure what else you would like to hear, but I will say that I know that, Rob, you asked for what we're hoping to find. If it's possible, and this is a hard thing to do, to just ask for this, but I'll just do it. If there is 5 to 10 acres with water and electricity and a barn and a possibility for housing, that would be great. And yeah, I'm happy to give any more information at any point during this call.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Next, we'll go to Elizabeth Keene.
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me. And I want to just say another lovely word about Molly. I had the great pleasure of meeting her after I took a year off from farming, and Molly came and worked with me shortly after that for a brief period of time, and immediately fell in love with her being and her work ethic, and am saddened, of course, by the situation, but also really encouraged by the community outpouring of support. So that's that. So as I said, my husband and I, Al, have been here at Indian Line Farm for, I think this is our 24th season. And my previous experience was zilch in terms of farming. I ended up being an apprentice at the Mehawi Harvest CSA, where I met my husband, Al. And then it was during that experience that I ended up meeting Robin Van En, who lived here at Indian Line Farm prior to her death in 1997. And it was at that moment, all of a sudden, there was this vacuum of who is going to be at Indian Line Farm. As many folks know, Robin was instrumental in starting the first CSA. So there was a lot of history and respect and nostalgia for this particular place. And many folks in the community didn't want it to be sold to a second homeowner and essentially like tear down the house and not really utilize the land. So Al and I were able to lease the land from Robin's son the year that she passed, and immediately fell in love with this particular property and felt just so grateful to have this opportunity to start getting our feet wet farming here at this place. And we really from the very beginning felt this incredible support for a young couple who wanted to farm. And I think that just even seeing the group here tonight, that is just continues to be what a lot of people in Berkshire County really want. They want to see agricultural land being used, and young farmers, though I'm quickly not in that category of young anymore, but stay on, be able to use property. So the situation, I'll quickly go through this as an example of something that might be able to work for Molly and the community. And that is that Al and I both came from backgrounds where neither of us had a lot of income to show for ourselves. I had been a volunteer for nearly 4 years prior to that, working in Guatemala. Al had left an engineering job and was now an apprentice. So we weren't very attractive to any bank. We, though kind of as things were percolating in our heads, we were approached by the Nature Conservancy and the Community Land Trust in the Southern Berkshires with this idea of entering into a partnership. And the Nature Conservancy was particularly interested in our property because of the adjacent wetlands, which are, it's a fen marsh. It houses a number of endangered species and plants. And so they wanted to make sure that anything that happened to this particular property would be protective and conserve those natural resources. The Community Land Trust was, I think, very, and I don't want to speak for Susan, but this particular property, its historic value, a young farming couple, and the idea of taking the land off, the land value away from the property and just having the buildings and the infrastructure be what we owned was obviously that's what they're about. And this project, I think, just fell exactly in line with what their ideal and their mission was. So we had a lot of conversations to bring Al and I on board in terms of really understanding what a 99-year lease would look like and what that would mean for us in our future. So simultaneously, we're having all these conversations about how to write the legal and the written documents. We also, through newsletters and written materials, were able to raise funds in order to purchase the property from Robin's son, David. And these prices seem very low now, but it was a long time ago. But we were able to purchase this property for $155,000. It's a 17-acre farm with a single farmhouse, a large barn. There was a tool shed and another small shed. And then the way we split it up is the Nature Conservancy bought a $50,000 conservation restriction. And we now have a whole written document in this conservation restriction, which binds us to certain activities and prevents certain activities. And then the Community Land Trust in the Southern Berkshire owns all of the property, even under my house. And we then lease the property from them. Al and I contributed $55,000 towards this, and then the CLT contributed another 50. That's how we divided the 155. I will say that this particular property was nearly in shambles when we purchased it, and which is why we were able to secure those numbers. So, as I said, the Community Land Trust in the Southern Berkshires, they own all of the property. But Al and I own all of what we call the improvements. So that means the house, the barn. If we put up a greenhouse, we own it. If we put up a fence, we own it. And ideally, improvements that we make to soil or other improvements could be quantified at a future date should we want to sell. I will say that certainly without the incredible vision and goodwill among Susan Witt and Frank Lowenstein, who we worked with at TNC, this project wouldn't have happened. I mean, Al and I didn't come from all of the ideas and the percolating that Susan has done for so many years. It was very much a learning curve for Al and I to be able to think about land in a different way and realize that we didn't have to own it. So that was it was a good process for us. So I think I'll just say in a nutshell, what a few of the things are that we essentially live with by being here. We have a 99-year renewable lease. And if I were to live that long, I could renew it if I want. At that point, the lease would then need to be reviewed, and that's when changes could happen. It's required that Al and I live in our house. Like, we can't just rent out our house to someone else while we farm it. The idea is that when you live here, you take care of it, you're part of the community, etc. We agreed in 1990, well, I guess it was 1998, the TNC and the Community Land Trust wanted to make sure that we could adhere to certain farming practices. So we agreed to an actual written document, which was the 1997 Certified Organic NOFA standards. And again, anything can be agreed to in a future agreement, but it was a way in which we could all agree on something of how the farm would be farmed. And it was important to all of us that it be farmed organically, but given the constantly changing term of what organic means, we chose a particular document that we can refer to. We then paid a lease fee right away. Some of it was waived for up to 10 years. And then now we have lease fees that we pay every single month. And I think the things that can be complicated, actually, let me back one, sorry, I have my little notes here. The other additional thing is that we, after consultation with Al and the town and Susan has a very funny story about Al going to the town hall and realizing that because a nonprofit was owning the property, that we weren't subject to property taxes. And together, Susan and Al, and I think really kind of this came from Al, they decided that, gosh, why would we be any different than any other farm on the street and not pay property taxes? So we pay all the property taxes. And it feels like a good way to be contributing to the town and the community. My kids ride the bus, so I'm happy to support the town in that way. Let's see. So one of the big questions, I think, for a lot of people that we've had to answer over the years, well, what happens when we want to sell? And the situation at that point would be, we would get 3 appraisals, and the combination of those 3 appraisals would be taken into consideration, and we'd have to deduct the farm value, the land value from that. It would just be the costs of the housing minus, or any of the buildings, the fences, the greenhouses, all of that stuff. That would all have to be added up, and that would be essentially what we would be allowed to sell. On any sale, a new owner would have to also agree to the lease agreement that we have with the CLT. And the lease agreement, again, is another long document that outlines lots of different things, what we can and cannot do, but it's mainly, it also, covers what happens in the event of sales. It also covers what happens if I don't farm for a year. There's all these, clauses, and we try to think of all the possible things that could go wrong or could go right, so that we would be, everyone would be happy in the event that, things change. So in terms of the documents, I'll just be really quick here. Again, we have a conservation restriction with the Nature Conservancy. We have a lease agreement with the Community Land Trust in the Southern Berkshire. And then we also have what's called a land management plan, which goes into a little bit more detail about how we will use the property. A few things are in there that were important to the CLT. For example, they wanted us to grow food for human consumption. And there's a certain minimum acreage that we had to commit to. They also wanted to make sure that we didn't, this was also important to the Nature Conservancy, that we not just raise animals, given the very fragile environment that's next door. So we have a minimum or a maximum number of animals that were allowed on this particular property. We're also committed to a certain gross profit. Again, the CLT wanted to make sure that they're not just leasing it to someone who wants to live on a farm, but not do the work and not do the work to, again, raise food for human consumption. So we have that. And I think, again, through the myriad conversations that we had with Susan and Frank, we were able to come to trust the documents that we created. And we were also able to come to trust the two organizations and their longevity in the community. And we had faith that they would be around throughout this process and, you know, into the future, regardless of whether the personalities were there or not. So we feel, again, confident in the documents that we are protected as farmers, but also that the community is also protected in the investment that they made in helping the CLT purchase the land. So I know that there are, since our agreement in 1998, there have been other folks who have done similar leases similar to ours. Caretaker Farm did a really amazing they took the documents and they ran with them. Theirs is a little bit different, but also another really great example of how these documents can work for both retiring farmers and new farmers. I'm happy to answer any other questions. I think one thing that's going to be really key in moving forward with Molly, obviously, is finding a property and finding an owner who's, you know, willing to kind of work with, hopefully with, you know, whether it's the CLT or, you know, a land trust, and be able to utilize these documents kind of as boilerplates so that the specifics can be met and people's, I'm not saying that very, what I wanted to say is that every situation is going to be a little bit different. And depending on the landowner and depending on the needs that Molly has, the documents will vary a little bit, but basically the situation that we have is very replicable. So I'm excited about Molly being able to possibly use this as an example.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. We're going to go to Margaret Moulton in just a minute from Berkshire Road. But in the meantime, I'm going to just make I said that I would put into the chat, if anybody's interested in making a tax-exempt donation to purchase land for Colfax, I'm putting it into the chat now. But anyhow, with that said, let us go on to Margaret Moulton to say what Berkshire Grown and reviews the suggestions that have been offered to her to date.
Hi, I just want to say that, you know, we sort of took the role of trying to spread the word about this evening's program, and we did social media posts and we sent out an email, a mass emailing, but usually you get, you know, 1, 2, maybe 5 responses. I had close to 30 responses from people, many people who I don't even know, saying, you know, just voicing their support for Molly. And it felt really good to see that and to be able to share that with Molly. I don't want to go into too much about what Berkshire Grown does, except that to say that, you know, our goal is really to keep farmers farming and support local food and farms in the Berkshires. And a lot of that is through doing exactly what Molly's talking about, you know, making connections between the farmer and the consumers and the land and just the community at large in our food system. So this situation just slips right in there in terms of continuing that support and making those connections and supporting everybody as much as we can. We didn't get any perfect answers, but I'm just going to say sort of some of the suggestions and ideas that came in, and I will sort them out by south to north in the county, Berkshire County. And I'm taking off the people's names who made suggestions. And there were lots of expressions of support and, you know, let me know what I can do, but these are land specific suggestions. One is maybe the Proctor's land in Egremont, which for those of you who don't know, that's at the top of Baldwin Hill, the dairy farm up there. Some of it is not in use, and I think that Morven or even Ian Allen are leasing some of it right now. A second one in South County was classic Berkshire. Another director of a collaborating organization was in a cafe talking about farming, and a person said, oh, I am a lawyer in New York and I want to buy a big piece of land in the Berkshires and start a farm and donate all of the food to food pantries in the Berkshires. So this person gave them Berkshire Grown contact. I haven't heard from them yet, but you know, the spirit is there. We got two suggestions from Columbia County. Would Molly consider options in Columbia County, or is she looking to stay just in Massachusetts, specifically Berkshires? And that also the Scarship Farm in Hillsdale on Mitchell Street is a big chunk of land. Part of it was sold and is being used, but another large part is available and has been on the market for a long time. And they might be interested in some sort of land rental or trust or lease. And then from North County, one person basically who has lots of ideas and access to land just said that he would be super interested in talking to Molly and supporting and trying to find solutions. He didn't have anything specific in mind. And another person said that they're looking at trying to put together a group of like-minded agricultural businesses to collaborate on a similarly aligned project that involves a specific large property with existing farm infrastructure. They have a potential anchor tenant and they're looking for complementary businesses. I know what land that is, but I did not get permission from that person to identify it tonight, and she's not on the call, but I can share that information. So those are the specific suggestions that came in through email.
Thank you so much. You certainly have a lot of leads that I think that are one good potential leads there. So then let's go on to Glenn Bergman of the Berkshire Agricultural Venture. And earlier, Glenn, I just wanted to say your bandwidth was preventing, I think, possibly both a video and things. So let's just see how it goes.
We'll stay on picture. Is this better?
That works. Oh, your voice is much stronger now.
All right, thank you. And Mark Phillips is also here. Margaret and I work together, both Berkshire Agricultural Ventures and Berkshire Grown in two different areas. But one of the things I just wanted to mention is that what we see here today and what Elizabeth was talking about is clearly a national issue of land insecurity for young farmers and for farmers trying to stay on their land. And we lose somewhere in the area of about 1 million acres a year in farmland to development. And so the same issue, especially with COVID and more people moving up here, we're going to be faced with that same problem. So I just want to thank the Community Land Trust for this work, because there are a lot of other complicated ways of trying to save land, OPAVs, things like that. And I believe that this is one of the best ways that we could possibly save some land and provide for young farmers, especially, to stay on that land and build community around that. I have nothing more to add except to say that we would like to work in conjunction with this and along with Berkshire Grown to figure out how we can build the fund for this. And so that we don't have to be doing these types of requests for a specific farmer, but that these are things that we're thinking about long-term and obtaining land to put people on, because there's enough people who want to get on land. And most of the young people who are working on land right now are working as tenant farmers, renting land or giving the right to work on land and working for people who have the means. And so I think from a standpoint of the Berkshires, especially Dutchess County, the New York Berkshires, that while we look at the arts as important, I think we should need to continue to look at farmers as being just as important, if not more important, for the local community. So just want to thank you for doing this. Mark, did you have anything you wanted to say or add?
No, I think you captured the spirit of what we're trying to do here perfectly. And I would just echo too that, Molly, I hope we can support you well beyond this call, that this is kind of just the start of the next step for you.
Well, thank you very much for that. This is our next, actually the last thing we were going to do is open the floor to suggestions from Zoom participants, or if there are any multi-billionaires who would like to purchase the entire Berkshires at this time, please speak up.
Well, I'm not a multi-billionaire, but I would just like to remind people that any donation of land or funds to purchase land is a tax deductible entity. It will help pay for the cost of the initial land. Beyond that, everything that follows, which if it's not supplied with electricity or water or even a house, can also be tax deductible. So please remember that in considering your donations. It can be either money to buy land or land itself.
Thank you, John. That's a very important point that might help us to find a solution. We in the education business call this wait time. I don't say anything until someone speaks.
I have a question, suggestion. I don't know if I'm on. My name is Ron Banks. Maybe one of the farmers or someone in the business can address this. My kids and I were reading a book by this funny guy, Joel Salatin, down in Virginia. And I'm sure he exaggerates a lot, but he says quite frequently he receives letters from farmers who are looking to gift their farm to a young farmer, and they don't want to give it to their kids because they know their kids will build condos on it, and that the farmer and their spouse want to see it remain a farm when they're gone. Is that an exaggeration, or does he really get all these letters from 80-year-old farmers? Anyone know?
True. There's a farm, there's a large farm down in Dutchess County right now that's for sale, part of a trust, and the children are selling it off. That's a couple.
Do any of the older farmers look to give theirs away to a young farmer?
Well, there is a farm in Connecticut that we're working with right now that it was purchased by another group, but is attempting to have that farmer buy it from them. And the old farmer is working the farm still with the young couple. But again, those are complicated situations. And this land trust by far is one of the best ways to be able to handle this long term, rather than trying to make these difficult and complicated transactions occur with agricultural overlays. And in Connecticut, there has never been one. So to preserve the land. So I believe that what is being done here is by far one of the best ways to preserve agricultural land without the pain and agony of a lot of lawyers. Those of you who are lawyers, I'm sorry I said that. Mea culpa.
Thank you.
Somebody just asked a question on the chat. a check for a donation needs to be made out to the Berkshire Community Land Trust. And that's a 501c3, so you get your tax deductible donation that way. Hope that answers the question.
Does it need to be stated that it's specifically for this project?
Yes, indeed.
So that's another important thing to write, I think.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, I will send it off again. It's in the chat line, but I'll put this right here again, just in response to the person who put that out. Let me just send this out. Also, here from there, are there rules about land being in a residential area?
It would be great if there was land in an area where a house could be built as well as farm. So a large enough parcel in a residential area would be perfect. Or if someone owned a large acreage, if 10 acres of it were put aside into the community land trust for leasing to Molly, then they'd be assured that their neighbors would be a farm forever.
Thank you, Susan. Also, the question just came up. What is the geographical perimeter of the area that we can be considered to receive help from Berkshire Grown? I think that's going to Glenn or to Mark.
I'm not sure what the question implies.
Oh, Berkshire Road. Margaret, this is for Margaret.
It goes for me, but I'm not sure I understand what the question is.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I realized that.
I'm sorry, can you hear?
Yep, go ahead, Sherry.
Yeah, so basically, we're just wondering what geographical area is covered by Berkshire. When we talk about the Berkshires, are we talking geographically the entire region or just the Massachusetts part, or kind of what parameters are we looking at for Molly to receive help?
I would say that's really a question for Molly. You know, at Berkshire Grown, we kind of talk about the Berkshires as a geographic region rather than defined by political outlines. But I think that the answer is really, you know, where Molly wants to consider farming.
Okay, I like that. I would, my preference, well, I'll start. I would love to remain as close as possible to my existing CSA membership, because if I have to move very far, then it needs a big shift in my business. Personally, for my own well-being, I'd like to stay in Massachusetts for healthcare. And, you know, I'm a part of this community now, and I would really love to stay close. So I would, you know, within the Alford Valley, the Great Barrington region is where I'd like to stay. I wouldn't say I'll totally rule out going back to New York, but at the moment that wouldn't be my preference unless something really special happens. But I'm wondering if Sherry's question is like, you know, the Community Land Trust and Berkshire Agricultural Ventures, they're like, you are looking to work within our county. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent.
And then Berkshire Agricultural is 4 counties. It's Dutchess, Litchfield, Columbia, and the Berkshires. But that's around loans, grants, and technical support that we do.
Okay, thank you. That all helps everyone. Thank you.
So Molly, is the Baldwin property a possibility to go back to? I mean, let's get down to some specifics about, you know, possible land for you. Is that, I mean, obviously there might be an interesting way of securing that land for you over a period of time. I'm thinking kind of broadly, but is that property conducive to the kind of farming you would like to do or get back to?
Thank you, Peter. It's possible, and Toby Casey, who now owns the farm, did reach out to me. There were some challenges on that property, which is why I left, and they were mostly just infrastructure. And I do believe that the flat prime farmland that they have in production and animal husbandry. So I'm not sure a return to that property will work, but like I say, he did reach out to me, and I am going to talk to him.
Thanks.
So I have a question as to whether we can look at this in a different way, but this is clearly not my area of expertise. So I would appreciate hearing from other people who do know. When we looked at buying property many years ago in the Berkshires, we found that there were some farms that had agricultural preserve restrictions on them, which effectively came from the farmers at some point receiving a payment from the state, and then essentially leaving their agricultural land agricultural in perpetuity. They therefore lost control of it in some way, but the property still hung together with the house and the farm. The reason I'm asking is I'm wondering if there's a way to do a search on those properties in the Berkshires, because these are people who clearly need to have agricultural use on their land. It's mandated by the state, and that's part of what you buy if you purchase that property, is that obligation to do so. And I would think that some of the people, had we bought the property we're looking at, this would just be the kind of thing that we would love to have on the property. Some of you who are much more familiar with these laws may know whether there's a way to do a search that way and see if there are properties or property owners who are available and would consider this.
I think that when an agriculture preservation restriction is put on land, that restricts any building of homes. So if Molly was looking for a site where she could farm and have a home, that wouldn't work. And of course, especially with a small vegetable farm, it's so important to have the farmer close to the farmland.
But I think you raise a good point, and I think it is possible to do a search for those records, those tax records, to see what is in an agricultural overlay in the area, and we could do that. So somebody could do that. I think we should. So
when you say this, if you could elaborate, Glenn, so search tax records?
Well, I think, excuse me, this is Mark Dunn with the farm in Alford, and this is something that we've done. We've worked through the Alford Land Trust and Berkshire Natural Resources Council to put agricultural, put our land into an agricultural preserve. And so it would be, I think, far easier just to contact, the Alford Land Trust and various town land trusts, because they would know which properties have been put into these programs.
Thank you. So the town land trusts.
So I think that, all APRs are all different. The restrictions have changed over the years. And I think Susan's right that the basic thing is they cannot be developed into real estate holdings, homes, etc. But I don't know that I think it's different for many different farms or different holdings. I don't know that you are required to farm. You're just not allowed to develop.
I just like to build off of this conversation, maybe suggest something out of the box, and Molly, you could come back and say this, it's, inappropriate. But there's another thing that we might want to do is to raise publicity or communication in the community about what the situation is, rather than hunt through, whether people have actual, land responsibilities. I'm talking about really making this a public issue in the community, getting a Berkshire Eagle article about this and talk about, about where is there land that this farmer can use to continue doing farming. So I'm building up what Dave said is not just look over, legal requirements of land that's in the community, but have the community beyond the 35 of us, 37 of us on the call tonight to hear about what's going on and to have the community help us solve this problem by trying to identify, opportunities for land that might be moved into a land trust or could in some other combination be useful. And I'm surely willing to help us get it in the work that we've been doing in other community, another community project to get a reporter from the Berkshire Eagle to be interested in this article. It's newsworthy, and I think we could position this in a way in which maybe someone who has land, who hasn't thought about how they could be really enriching the community by developing a land trust or some type of, a relationship with Molly that would enable her to stay in the community. So Molly, maybe I've talked out of turn, in terms of having this more of a community piece of information, but I think that might be a way of trying to identify some land that we don't know about. Just a wild thought.
Peter,
The Berkshire, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Molly, I just, well, Molly has spoken to someone at the Berkshire Eagle, and I spoke to him yesterday as well. So that's already underway, and I'm not sure if it was in the paper today or will be in the next couple of days. But it was also in the Edge, the online paper, if you get that. So we're trying to disseminate it as widely as possible in the media. So that's a good idea, but we're working on it. Thank you.
I agree with Peter also, just from the point of view that it might be great to get something at WAMC if this could somehow be a part of one of their morning talk shows, because as I have found, you just have to communicate ideas multiple times and repeat it over and over again if you ever want people to actually hear it.
I think going forward, there was a little bit of the language that, because I'm feeling stressed and overworked, a little bit of the language that went out in the Berkshire Edge was a little bit uncomfortable for me, but I do understand its origin. Save Colfax Farm. I mean, it is true. I need somewhere to go, but it puts me in a slightly uncomfortable position. I feel confident that the article that's coming out in the Berkshire Eagle, that he has emphasized what it means for the community at large and that it's a larger issue beyond me. And I'm not adverse to more public dissemination, but I would like it to be more about how this is a land security and housing issue that our entire community is affected by, and that I just happen to be an example of that. Just because it's a lot of weight for me to carry. But I believe in this, and if it wasn't me and whoever it was, I have farmer friends who are not land secure, and housing is a problem. So for it to be continued to talk about in our community is okay with me, but I just think some of the language, we should be careful and make sure that we're like talking about this as a thing that's important to all of us and not just make it very personal about my situation. If that.
I agree with you. I think that Glenn brought that up. That what we need to do is to obtain, essentially, if all of the groups involved on this call, and if there are anybody, maybe get the Conservancy as well, maybe we could go to the press or to all media that is available to describe what Glenn described as a national issue of losing 1 million acres a year to development. And how do we keep young farmers on the land? How do we attract farmers to this place? Because I think that's the future of the Berkshires is going to require it.
It's my feeling that if this community trust had enough funds, I mean, multi-million dollars of funds put away, and that land was purchased and began to be purchased under the trust's present documents, it's similar to Indian line, you would have no problem attracting young people to farm who are already here working on farms, who want land to work on that is secure. And you will bring people to the Berkshires just having that. I believe that having the land under trust and that people just putting out a request for farmers, you will get people very easily.
Yes, it's kind of like from Field of Dreams, build it and they will come. In our case, it's buy it and they will farm.
Glenn, I agree with you. Unlimited funds are always desirable. We had a Zoom meeting with a group up in Pittsfield a couple of weeks ago, and they wanted to start a land trust up there to do affordable housing. And every single one of them said, you know, if we had unlimited funds, this would be really easy. And that's just been the byword on every meeting. So we just need unlimited funds. If you know any source for unlimited funds, we'll be glad to listen.
We've had some other information that's been put into the chat, and I think we've got all sorts of information that we're going to collate and put together. We have been on the meeting now for almost an hour and 15 minutes, and I don't know how much time people allocated for the meeting, but if we're coming to the end of this, I guess the concept is what do we do? What do we do next? And I think we've gotten some good suggestions. I think that perhaps there's some work to be done with Berkshire Grown, Berkshire Agricultural Venture, and Community Land Trust, and perhaps Nature Conservancy to outline and define the problems that so that we could potentially attract these things and get out the information that we've presented here tonight to see if basically to plan next steps for going forward. Is there something else someone else would like to bring up, or should we bring this meeting to a close?
I would just like to say thank you so much for caring about my personal story, but just more largely caring about this saving farmland and creating housing and secure land for young people to farm, or new farmers or existing farmers. I just feel really grateful to be a part of the community. Thank you.
Well, I think that's the perfect way of ending our meeting, if that's the case, Molly. And I think that I want to thank all the participants on behalf of Berkshire Community Land Trust and our co-sponsors, Berkshire Agricultural Ventures and Berkshire Grown. And this is not the end, this is a beginning of basically getting ourselves into a better position for young people and for our community, because after all, the farmer feeds us all.
Rob, I would just like to add that in closing, if anyone has any thoughts subsequent to this meeting because of the meeting, you all have Susan's email, you have my email, and just please send us your thoughts of what we might be doing to take the next step. So please just think about it some, and how can we keep on moving in the right direction.
Well, then, to everybody, thank you very much for participating, and we'll see where we will go from here. I think we've got our work cut out for us in order to make farming possible throughout Berkshire County, but more importantly, become just as we are a destination for the arts, if we can make it also a destination for small farmers as well. So I will close out the meeting, and thanks very much.